Hi everybody, Dr. Joe back again. Thanks for joining the third video series here. I just wanted to let you know that the questions and the comments were really great after the last one we did just a few days ago. And the questions were really about, okay, so now how do we do it? And in the work that we do, we use the model of meditation to be able to connect to that unified field, that quantum field. So if the majority of the time people are living by the hormones of stress and their brain and body are aroused and all of their attention is on their outer world and they're narrowing their focus on matter and they're omitting the wave function of possibility, then it would make sense that when the hormones of stress begin to endorse our senses to become materialists, then the best way to begin to connect to this unified field is to begin to disconnect from our senses. So when we sit our bodies down and we close our eyes and we play soft music in the background or we put earplugs in, that's less information coming into the brain because we're not seeing anything or hearing anything. If we're sitting our body down and we're not getting up and moving around and experiencing anything, or we're not feeling anything or tasting anything or smelling anything, the less sensory information that's coming into the brain all of a sudden causes us to focus more on our inner world of thoughts and feelings and less on our outer world of physical reality. The action of doing this begins to make some very significant physiological and biological changes in the brain. When you're shifting your attention from one person to one problem, to one thing, the brain fires very incoherently. When you begin to close your eyes and you begin to disconnect from your outer world and you're getting beyond your body and not thinking about time, the process of doing that causes you to diminish the amount of connection you have to your outer world because it's your senses that connect you to the outer world. If you couldn't see anything, you couldn't hear anything, you couldn't taste anything, you couldn't feel anything, and you couldn't smell anything, then you couldn't experience your outer world. So the act of sitting your body down, getting beyond your environment and your body and time is what we do in the process of meditation. So the act of meditating, the act of sitting still and being defined by your inner world instead of by your outer world is the methodology we use to connect to the unified field. So when we're living by the hormones of stress, we're also putting all of our attention on our environment. We're always putting our attention on our body because our body is aroused and we're always thinking about time. And it's that primitive mechanism, where you're being chased by a predator, where you're looking in your outer environment to see where you're going to run. You're paying attention to your body because it's the thing that's being threatened, and you're thinking about how much time you have to get somewhere from point A to point B. Then your whole focus and all of your attention being on the body, the environment, and time enslaves you to the laws of three-dimensional reality of a body existing in space and time. So, when you begin to go inward and you take your attention off your body and become nobody, the act of no longer putting your attention on your body suppresses the circuits in your brain that you use to feel and move. If you're no longer thinking about your outer environment made up of people and objects and things and places, then if you're no longer thinking about all of those things in your outer environment, then of course you're getting beyond your environment. And if you're not thinking about the predictable future or the familiar past and you're relaxing into the present moment and you feel safe enough to create, if you do that properly then and you begin to connect to that field, the process of you looking for and paying attention to that energy and beginning to connect to it brings it to life. Because where you place your attention, as you've learned, is where you place your energy. So now you're becoming aware of it because you're no longer paying attention to matter. You're no longer defining your reality as a materialist. You're sensing energy and information. And if you keep experiencing that energy to the smallest measure, staying present with it, tuning into it, falling into it, surrendering to it, the more you begin to relax into it, the more you begin to pay attention to it, the more you experience it. And if experience enriches the brain, and it does, then you begin to install the circuits in your brain to perceive more of it the next time. And every time you experience a little bit more of it, you keep experiencing more of it, and you begin to change your brain to have the circuits in place to perceive it. So then, when you begin to take your attention off matter and put it on the field, and you begin to connect to that unified field, you'll go from the consciousness of being a somebody to the consciousness of being a nobody to the consciousness of being everybody. That is the unified field. You'll go from the consciousness of being someone to the consciousness of being no one to the consciousness of being everyone. That is the unified field. Going from the consciousness of something to the consciousness of nothing to the consciousness of everything. From the consciousness of somewhere to the consciousness of nowhere to the consciousness of everywhere. That's the quantum field. From the consciousness of some time to the consciousness of no time to the consciousness of every time. And so here is that unified field, that intelligence that lives within you and all around you. It is always present. And most people have all of their attention on the somebody, on the someone, on something, on somewhere, and sometime. And the moment you become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time, and you surrender into the generous present moment, now you're aligning with that consciousness. Now your consciousness, subjective consciousness, is connecting to that objective consciousness. Now you're on the bridge moving into that unified field. So now as you begin to pay attention to it, as you begin to experience it, as you begin to surrender to it, you begin to move closer to it. So if you begin to go from one point of consciousness to another point of consciousness, and you close the space between 2 points of consciousness, you diminish the amount of time. And that means then the more you move closer to it, the shorter amount of time it takes for things to begin to materialize in your life. And if the separation between 2 points of consciousness creates separation, then the closer you move to it, the more whole you feel. And the more whole you feel, then you feel like your dreams have already happened. In other words, you're no longer in lack. You feel like your dreams have already happened. So people in the work that we teach around the world who begin to connect to this unified field begin to have significant changes in their life and within their body within shorter and shorter amounts of time because they're moving closer to that unified field. That field of information that governs all the laws of nature that you and I have access to. And we have all the biological and neurological machinery to connect to it. So what if every day you took a little bit of time out of your busy life to begin to open your focus and to begin to pay attention to that unified field, that field of information that exists beyond space and time, that you can't experience with your senses, but you can only experience with your awareness, your consciousness. And if you begin to connect to that unified field and experience it, it makes sense then that the more you experience it, the more you enrich the circuits in your brain to begin to perceive it more in your life. And the act of doing that over and over again allows you to begin to connect to it more and more, and you begin to see the miracles and the opportunities begin to show up. So some of the questions that we've gotten in the last few videos is, how do we do this? How do we begin to practice it? So in the next video, I'll talk about the online course that we're offering and the 7 lessons for you to begin to apply all these principles to your life.